n8n is a super powerful platform for building AI automations and AI agents. But as with all platforms, there are a couple of parts of the platform that people often get stuck with. So in this video, I'm going to go through my top 5 tips for building more powerful and more production ready AI automations and agents in n8n. So the most common question I get is what large language model to use. So if I quickly drag in the AI agent and I choose model, you can see that n8n actually supports most of the major providers of models. So that's OpenAI, Google Gemini models, as well as Anthropic Claude models. The other thing that most people don't know about is OpenRouter. So OpenRouter is a service that lets you basically access any model out there with the same API. So if you have a model that is not natively available within n8n, for example, DeepSeek a while back before it became popular was not available in n8n natively, but you could have used it through OpenRouter. Now, in terms of what model to use, it really depends on what you are trying to do. So I'll just talk through a couple of the differentiators here, right? So as of today, which is March 21st, I find that I gravitate towards using the Gemini 2.0 models. Gemini 2.0 Flash is a really good model in terms of trading off performance against cost. So if you compare Gemini 2.0 costs against the relevant OpenAI models, such as GPT-4o, you'll see that Gemini 2.0 Flash is significantly cheaper, but performing quite similarly. So if you're not sure in terms of cost and performance, you can always come to artificialanalysis.ai, and they've got lots of different benchmarks. But in terms of, I guess, more qualitative stuff, if you're doing code generation, that sort of stuff, I would generally recommend the Claude 3.5 or 3.7 models. If you're doing more like data parsing, I would recommend the Google Gemini models. And for just generic ChatGPT style questions, I would recommend OpenAI models. If you're doing like blog post writing, I would usually start with testing Claude 3.5 or 3.7, but I would test all of them depending on like type of blog posts or social media content that you're trying to generate. So long TLDR here is really you need to pick the right model for your use case. So you will likely need to test a couple of models to get a good feel for what you're doing. Cool. So that's tip number 1. Tip number 2 is how to handle documents. So this is a general, I guess, rule. If you're building an AI automation, chances are you will need to ingest some sort of files or documents. So those might be PDFs, might be docx files, it might be websites, it might be any of those things. So if you just want something basic, n8n actually has a couple of extract from file nodes. And these do a decent job if you just want something, I guess, basic. So it just gets the raw contents, right? But if you want something a bit more advanced, for example, you want to get Markdown out of a website, you will need to use a third-party API tool for that. So I would recommend something like Dumpling AI, and something like this will have lots of different, more advanced conversion tools and lets you sort of pull data out of more formats and in a more LLM ready format compared to what's built into n8n. But my, I guess, rule or tip here is definitely start with using the built-in operations within n8n and make sure that you are handling the specific format properly. So if it is HTML, use the HTML. If it's CSV, use the CSV operation. And it's really only when you're starting to get into production and you need to squeeze out every drop of performance, I would look into third-party APIs where you can get more LLM ready data out of the specific document or file that you're looking to process. Cool. So that's tip number 2. Tip number 3 is you've built a AI agent or workflow in n8n. A lot of the times you actually want to expose that as a API endpoint, right? So maybe you're building a web app, or for whatever reason, you want to expose your n8n build as a API endpoint. So to do that, you actually need to use the webhook trigger. So if you press this, you'll see that they give you this URL, they give you a test URL, production URL, and you can sort of say what method you want it to be available via. So usually if it's a, I guess, more involved workflow, then it should be a post request. And then you can sort of set up basically everything that you need here. And then this is your endpoint. If you're actually doing this, I would actually recommend reading through the documentation. There are a couple of gotchas in here. If you're interested in going into more detail on this, just leave a comment below and I can make a dedicated video on this. But for this tip, just know that this option is available to you. If you want to expose an API, create an API, use the webhook trigger. That's tip 3. Tip 4 is data pinning. So this is a functionality that's hidden away in n8n that I didn't know about for a really long time, but now that I know about it, I use it in basically all of my builds. So I'll just quickly give you a example, right? So let's just do something. We'll run execute sub workflows. So let's just scrape a URL. Not need to open it. Just want to, yep, there we go. So let's scrape n8n website. And let's just do it like this. And if we just test this step, I get an output, right? So with this output, if I come back here and I go to the next block, I'm able to reference it. Problem is, after I do a hard reload of this page, that data disappears. And that means I need to run this test step again before I can reference this data. So not a huge problem if you've already finished your build, but it's sort of those cases where you're halfway through the build, you need to go do something else and you come back and then all your data's gone. So what you can actually do is pin data here. So there's this pin data option. And what this will do is it will save the data. So even if I do a reload, right? Actually, let me just save this. If I do a reload and I come back and you can see that this node has become purple because it's pinned. I click into here, you'll see that my data is still here. So it's super handy. Not a very complex feature, but a feature that I find, at least for me, was hidden away and didn't know about. And now that I know about it, I use it a lot. Cool. Final tip is around error handling. So if you're trying to push any sort of automation, workflow, or agent into production, you will need robust error handling. And what that means is if something goes wrong in your workflow, you want to be notified of it. So when you create a workflow and you save it, there is actually the settings part. There is this error workflow. And basically it is a second workflow that you can run to notify yourself, right? And you can pick any workflow here. So you will need to create an error workflow to select here. And I'll just show you as an example what that can look like. So the trigger will always be the error trigger. And what you will need to do is run a fetch test, and you just need some sort of node that will notify you, right? So it might be as simple as send yourself an email, right? Just email yourself every time there's an error. Or it could be something like Slack, right? Send a Slack message to a channel. So maybe like you have a error notification channel in Slack and you just want to send a message to that Slack channel. Simple as that. You just need to save this and then you can sort of set it as an error workflow. So I can't select this like workflow as its own error workflow, I don't believe, but you get what I mean, right? So you turn this into send error to Slack, something like that. And then when you go into the actual workflow that you're bringing into production, you can sort of come in and select send error to Slack as the error workflow. So it turns out you can select the same workflow as the error workflow, which is interesting, but that is the tip. So that's basically it for my top 5 tips. So quick recap. Number 1, choosing the LLM to use. It's really dependent on what you're trying to achieve. Definitely have a play around with all the models from the main foundation model labs to get a feel for what's good, but you really will need to test for each build that you're doing. Number 2 is extracting data for your AI automations or your AI agents. Make sure to use a relevant tool for extracting data. To begin with, I would just use what's in n8n. Only when you really need to squeeze out that extra performance, I would recommend using a third-party tool such as Dumpling AI to do that data extraction and conversion. Tip number 3 was around turning n8n builds into APIs. So to do that, use the webhook trigger, which will expose a URL for you to use as an API endpoint. Tip number 4 was data pinning. So I'm not going to run this again, but if you remember, you can pin data. When you have output, there's a pin button here. You can click that and turns your node purple, and it will save that data even when you reload your workflow, so you can always use it. And then finally was the error handling workflow. So once you've saved a workflow, you can set a error workflow so that you can be notified when there is an error in your build. And that's it for this video. If you have any thoughts, questions, or comments, leave them below and I'll try my best to get back to you.